Caravaggio's The Incredulity of St. Thomas famously depicts the biblical account of a man who would not believe Jesus had resurrected until he had seen and felt this miraculous returned body for himself. Theologians differ as to whether or not we should assume Thomas actually did rely on that second dimension of touch to believe, or if the image of Jesus alone sufficed. There has also been debate about what the implications are for such an event, second base or not, in regards to the expectations for individual salvation. To the image of doubting Thomas, as it is more commonly known, and the wound for its unabashed homoeroticism, which I do not think can be wholly attributed to Caravaggio's unique and irreverent representation. Such overtones seem to be strewn throughout the biblical stories, as I had the opportunity to witness recently, catching a glimpse of the televised evangelical sermons my mother regularly watches. I delighted in noticing a very young pastor try to work himself out of a confusing explanation of the biblical term knowing, which he reminded us was intimate in nature, though not explicitly sexual. Still, he managed to make a hilariously expressive gesture with his hands while expanding on the phrase, Jesus was in the Father was in Jesus, Jesus went in us, and we were in the Father, ad nauseam. From a contemporary biological perspective, St. Thomas's episode of incredulity can indeed be seen as a sexual exchange of sorts, in that there occurred a transfer of information that yielded a recombination, a reprogramming. Thomas, according to modern biblical accounts at least, will emerge from this experience changed, revived in his faith, though possibly a little guilty over his skepticism. Jesus' guiding hand on Thomas's wrist, his cautious and excited, though quite deep, entering of the wound, and the two eager onlookers who seemed to be waiting for a grand reveal themselves reinforced, for me, the importance of the term incredulity from Caravaggio's original translated title. It is unfortunate, or perhaps careless, or even malicious, that this image has come to be associated with doubt, which implies a sense of disbelief that can be rectified with a modest amount of physical proofs. Ultimately, it is an undeserved, optimistic description. Incredulity, however, and Caravaggio's treatment of the scene implies something very different. Thomas and the onlookers, while knuckle-deep and responding to the visceral experience, does not appear as those who have laid eyes on a long, thought-to-be lost friend. In fact, I could imagine this Thomas recoiling, rubbing the tips of his fingers together and smacking cheap parlor tricks. I have also noticed a tendency in modern interpretations of the incredulity scene to include increasingly deeper phalangeal penetration, perhaps a reflection of the exponential growth of secularism since the so-called Age of Enlightenment, a techno-erotic touch that goes ever deeper. Alas, incredulity denotes the inability and the unwillingness to believe. An unwillingness, perhaps, governed by greed, jealousy, hate, or any number of other vile traits. In our present situation, when irrefutable videographic evidence of Eric Garner being choked to death is widely available, yet fails to produce a criminal indictment, it seems we are dealing with an obscene level of unwillingness to comprehend, to condemn, to commiserate. In an interview from Cuba, Asada Shakur briefly, painfully recalls how after the incident on the highway all those years ago, police assigned to watch over her in the hospital would often torture Asada by putting their fingers directly into her many bullet wounds, asking repeatedly, "Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt?" Basically, what was going on involved an intended coercion of information transfer, an ontological rate that demonstrates how in the U.S. neither seeing nor feeling in the tactile sense are guarantees to humanitarian compassion. Our problem in this country is not at all one of belief. It is rather one of recognition that the others affected by the dominant power structures, institutional violence, inequalities, and systematic oppression are in fact human, with subjectivities like their own. Currently, one's perceived level of blackness is inversely proportional to this notion, and it is purely a matter of a fundamental lack of will in the socius to look into the wounds of others and not only see them, but see yourself. In response to the organization of black liberationists throughout the second half of the 20th century, the U.S. government devised methods of flooding the black and low-income neighborhoods with hard drugs like crack cocaine, creating debilitating addictions for the popular base of those forward-thinking movements. This created an imposed network of information transfer and drug dealing, which is akin to a sexual enslavement on a massive scale. But the marginalized communities also responded, and out of this dreary atmosphere emerged a revolutionary tool for social expression and collective organization: hip-hop. Hip-hop established a unique relationship of exchange between disenfranchised communities and technology, creating what Kanye West would later describe as an infectious, dark diction that ran counter to the prevailing American grammar, elucidated by Hortense Spillers as a genocidal language of anti-blackness. Matt Ridley, a writer investigating the evolutionary psychology of sexual selection, proposes the theory that reproductive sex evolved in nature as a solution to the problem of parasites, that this process of coded information exchange and genetic recombination or remixing was a way to keep the parasites locked out. It was survival. Peter Ludlow, in The Myth of Human Language, goes on to apply a similar metaphorical understanding to language, remarking that when people get together, they actually build a common micro-language on the fly, rewiring their shared language so as to avoid groupthink, and those who attempt to co-opt their language, locking out eavesdroppers and outsiders. Grammar as politics by other means. Within this framework of remixing, information exchange, encryption, and language construction, we may come to understand how the origins of hip-hop exemplified a revolutionary techno-sexual network of resistance born out of our gaping collective wounds. In order to survive, this network of resistance must retain its aggressive nature of cyber-socialist copulation or sampling, sharing, communicating outside of exploitative modes of production and dissemination. Corporate-sponsored intellectual property legislation, standardization, a plurality of options, 1,000 little sexes, the creation of individualized rap capitalist lifestyle versions, and state-level co-optation, however, threatened the integrity and collective mobilization of the early hip-hop movement. Kanye, whose Christian roots inspire him to pronounce himself as a god under Jesus and take the very name Yeezus, has made the correlation that hip-hop, rap, that dark diction has become America's addiction and can thus be considered a kind of crack music. Kanye enjoys describing this music in liberatory terms, but this kind of economic emancipation available to someone with a music career enthusiastically embraced by the US and global mainstream is felt by few outside of an immediate inner circle. The understanding of the limited emancipatory scope of the kind of upward-moving, wealth-acquiring project espoused by Kanye and other top-tier hip-hop artists is distilled in the counter-sentiment that music is the new cotton. In other words, total liberation is in fundamental conflict with the dominant imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist, heteronormative, patriarchal paradigm. Time wounds all heals. Like that ever reopening wound of Prometheus, the laceration of slavery and the deep growing gash of Jim Crow are still upon us, closing wearily with each new cut, each renewed draconian punishment. But the marks of liberationists are not to be completely healed, subsumed by new black skin, forgotten. They are powerful in their opacity, as with Philoctetes' stubborn, unhealing wound from Derek Walcott's Omeros. He believed The swelling came from the chained ankles of his grandfathers, or else why was there no cure? We must, as long as the knife is there, acknowledge its presence and not be content with its protracted retreat. It is this recognition of our gaping wounds and our ability to transform with them which will contribute to our ultimate liberation. The wound can be a docking port for remixing and reprogramming, as well as a gateway for metamorphosis, reemergence. Cultural rupturing, the application of historical wound creation, recreation, is an educational tool for the dismantling of colonial narratives in the seedbed of our collective consciousness. Indeed, as Edouard Glissant reminds us, every word is an earth whose subsoil must be searched. Thus, poetry is the flesh and dust of this planet, and emerging from the lingering necrotic wounds therein, a technics of nature, fugitivists. To borrow a fabulous term from a co-exhibiting artist, preacher's son, cultivated in the violent microcosm of history and non-human affects, becomings, with a collective capability to swiftly devour both the master's house, a cellulose-laden delicacy, and the master's prized field of sweet tall grass, the plantation. This wound, which will heal and reveal the metaphysical one it engendered, will be a permanent reminder, as well as a mirror of identification and recognition. I will carry it with me as a blueprint of realizable futures, in the hopes that it will one day be fertile breeding ground for a revolutionary sublimation and infestation. It won't sound like the world's smallest violin, that favorite of capitalist hand gestures, with a decibel level in the Cajun range for the majority of us. It will be like deafening or soothing rhythms of an insect in nocturnal stridulation, the compound stare of a large female grasshopper, Papergunia, rubbing a hind leg against a forewing as she overcomes you.